After a lifetime of digging through the myths and legends of antiquity, I gotta admit something to you. I am getting a little weary. Time and time again, I see humanity falling into the exact same traps, documenting our own cyclical ruin through the sheer force of our intellectual pride. So, welcome to this explainer. Today, we aren't looking at the usual heroes and triumphs. Instead, we're opening up the archives to look at a dark, cautionary fable for the modern age. So let's just dive right into this and examine the very architecture of our own undoing. For the philosophy students tuning in, I actually want to bypass our usual preamble and hook you immediately with this pretty chilling proclamation. This is spoken by a figure known as the Wanderer. Imagine standing on a road, totally celebrating how far you've come, and this figure beside you looks at your milestone and says, "You see a marker of distance, but I see a stitch in the shroud of the universe." It instantly sets this heavy, Mephistophelian tone, right? The Wanderer doesn't care about your goals or your progress. He operates on a cosmic, deeply cynical timeline. He's literally the embodiment of a very specific, highly dangerous concept that we really need to unpack. To actually understand the Wanderer, we need to frame our theoretical foundation. We're talking about the alchemical shadow. In classic literature, when a seeker becomes just a bit too arrogant, too obsessed with their own intellect, and totally disconnected from their true fundamental nature, well, the shadow emerges. It's the repressed, dark aspect of the self-made manifest. And here's the kicker. It doesn't arrive to fight you. No, it arrives to agree with your worst impulses, right up until you completely destroy yourself with your own intellectual pride. Now notice the stark contrast between the Wanderer and our traditional mythological guides. You likely know the bright Hermes, right? He offers a torch, he gives you maps, he points the way to salvation and clarity. But the Wanderer, he's the dark psychopomp. He's this shadow double of Hermes. He actually guides you with the absence of light. He operates with this mercurial indifference to human despair, and frankly, he absolutely delights in seeing spirits lost in the in-between. So let's look at how this plays out in practice.
Starting with Section 1. The Parable of the Weaver's Milestone.
Let's examine the timeline of this fable to see how it builds a picture of devastating irony. Picture this. We have a young pilgrim walking with a really light heart, stopping at every single stone marker under a dying oak tree just to celebrate getting closer to the great city. He's boasting about his progress. But the Wanderer, whose silhouette literally absorbs the sun's rays, sees the timeline entirely differently. To the Wanderer, an hour of progress is just a stitch in the shroud of the universe. A day? That's just the cold rhythm of a clock counting down final hours, and a lifetime is nothing but a slow march toward dissolution. The Wanderer walks away, leaving absolutely no boot marks on the earth, but leaves the pilgrim completely paralyzed, realizing his road is just a long funeral procession for the living.
If we step back for a formal academic review of these two philosophies, the clash is just striking. The pilgrim looks at milestones and sees progress. The Wanderer looks at those exact same milestones and sees a countdown to dissolution. The pilgrim believes the destination is this grand place of self-discovery, while the Wanderer knows the destination is just a phantom. This fundamental disorientation is exactly what the dark psychopomp calls the trap of the journey. When you're that obsessed with the destination, you become entirely blind to the reality of the road. Which brings us to Section 2, the Parable of the Salt-Choked Compass. In the heart of a vast desert, our seeker finds himself at a crossroads, clutching a compass of pure gold. He actually begs the shadow double of Hermes for the way to the hidden oasis, but the predatory psychopomp doesn't offer a map at all. Instead, he tells the seeker to trust the needle of his own hope, delivering this absolutely devastating line. Hope is a compass that points only toward the most desolate and beautiful mirages. And driven by his own fear, the seeker follows his hope right into a salt-choked wasteland. The Wanderer just watches with complete mercurial indifference. He literally used the seeker's own hope against him. And this brilliantly illustrates the concept of the Faustian landscape. In another parable, a merchant seeking the ultimate market encounters our dark psychopomp, who carries a satchel filled with the broken promises of men who thought they could outrun time. The merchant realizes way too late that the road behind him has simply vanished. Every direction looks identical. It's a realm of perpetual disorientation. Think about how perfectly this metaphor maps onto modern human disillusionment. This vanishing wake is the endless burnout of modern life. It's the frantic commerce of a soul that thinks every mile traveled is self-discovery, only to realize they're trapped in a predatory stillness, already claimed by the void. It's a mechanism of psychological capture, a concept that becomes incredibly clear when we look at the ultimate architects of these traps. Let's move into Section 3, the Minister of Misery and Lucifer's Harvest.
So how does a demon actually capture a soul? Well, Mephistopheles tells Lucifer that swift destruction would actually be a mercy compared to his method. Instead, he uses this terrifying three-step method of harvest. First, you allow the mortal trivial pleasures. Let the scholar believe his magic actually makes him a god. Second, you let them weave their own nets of pride. Let them believe their sins are minor. And third, you just wait until the end to reveal that their supposed power is merely a gilded prison. They end up building their own hellmouth, far deeper than any pit a demon could ever carve for them.
The absolutely crucial point here is understanding the illusions of power. Mortals are just incredibly easily duped by their own vanity. We mistake demonic leashes for golden chains. We seek to rule the world, but freely offer up our intellect and our souls in bondage just to do it. And perhaps the darkest irony of all, we absolutely love to see corruption dressed up in holy robes. Remember when Faust asks Mephistopheles to appear as a Franciscan friar? Lucifer literally chuckles at that. Appearing as their conscience allows the demon to lead them into the darkest pits while they fully believe they're acting with absolute righteousness. It's pride that makes the scholar believe he is the master.
When you strip away all those illusions, you are left with this horrifying truth from Mephistopheles. Hell is not some physical pit of fire. Hell is a psychological state of being. It's this relentless gnawing of regret. The demon's role isn't actually to deny you what you want. His true role is to ensure you get exactly what you desire so you can suffer the eternal torment of having everything and holding nothing. It is the absolute ultimate punishment for intellectual arrogance.
Which leads us to Section 4, the parable of the rational masquerade, the final act. In this kingdom, citizens spend their entire lives in the public square, endlessly debating which costumes are the most rational to wear. They really think they're building a civilization of reason, but hiding underneath their heavy cloaks of logic is their physis. Now, physis is the biological, visceral orientation of the body that decides what feels beautiful or repulsive way before logic ever even enters the chat. The spirit of negation mocks their logical structures, calling it a vile economy of the mind. So our grand logical debates, they're mostly just fractal patterns of collective fear masquerading as reason, simply hiding us from the abyss. We can so clearly see the divide in this masquerade. On one side, you have the credulous mob. They trade the vital fire of their veins, what we call the spirit of becoming, for the heavy, leaden spirit of gravity, all just to preserve their gilded cages and win some unearned status in the debate. But on the flip side, you have the sovereign individual. These few actually see right through the charade. They stop reciting the script of the crowd, and they dare to listen to the delicate, hidden logic of their own bodies. They become the architects of their own meaning, rather than just actors in some institutional play.
But stepping out of that masquerade, that requires a tragic exchange. The path of the sovereign seeker is not easy for sure. First, you have to accept the logic of zero, meaning the complete insignificance of all that unearned status you used to crave. You have to acknowledge the liquefaction of the soul, essentially breaking down who you thought you were. Only then can you finally hear the honest sound of the universe. And a quick warning here, the Council of Inferno, the keepers of the status quo, they will reject you for being too honest. You're going to be left walking a fragile rope over the abyss, knowing that the highest wisdom isn't winning a debate, but bravely accepting your own true nature.
Which finally brings us to the end of our dark fable and leaves us with one pretty undeniable question. After seeing the illusions of the Wanderer, the terrifying traps of Mephistopheles, and the vile economy of the masquerade, what are you gonna do? Will you just remain in the safety of the valley, endlessly debating in an institutional play to feed your own intellectual pride? Or do you actually have the courage to face your own alchemical shadow, acknowledge the abyss, and reclaim your spirit of becoming? The choice, as it always is entirely yours. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.